Welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navik.co. This episode is brought to you by Heroic Labs, which powers some of the world's biggest games with its Heroic game stack. Its composable products are Nakama, the open source backend game server, Hero, the game development framework for all your live service game features, including the complexity of managing offline mode, Satori, the world-class live ops product for maximizing monetization and retention, and lastly, the Heroic Cloud to provide massive scalability. After nearly 10 years of operation, thousands of studios trust Heroic Labs to help them focus on their games and not worry about game tech or scaling for success. To learn more and reach out, make sure to visit heroiclabs.com or check out the link in the show notes. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Niko Vuori. Today, we have a very special episode for you. We are delving into a category of gaming that is very near and dear to my heart, having worked in it for a long time, and that is, and always has been, a major driver of revenue for the industry. But it often gets overlooked and misunderstood by mainstream analysts and commentators. And that category is social casino. The games that mimic land-based casino games, but aren't encumbered by the regulations that govern actual games of chance. And as a result, are much more free to experiment with novel game mechanics and new designs. Social casino as a category generated almost $8 billion in annual revenue last year and is still growing at a very healthy clip, around 8% CAGR. So to go deeper into the world of social casino, we have a great guest. It's another former colleague of mine from the Zynga days, and that is Danny Moy. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at SciPlay. SciPlay, the social arm, was spun out as its own company in 2019, but then it was reacquired back in 2023 and taken private again. Danny will tell us a little bit more about those dynamics as well. SciPlay generates somewhere in the region of $700 million by my industry search in annual revenue. They've got a team of about 800 across 6 global studios, and they operate at least 11 games, mostly in the slots category. So without further ado, today I'm very excited to welcome Danny Moy, the Chief Strategy Officer of SciPlay, to the show. Danny, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you, Niko, for having me on the podcast. I think we've talked about this for a while, but I'm finally glad we can get together this morning.
Exactly. Well, I'm so glad that we made this happen. It's been a while in the making, but this is going to be a great episode. And like I said, I'm extremely close to social casino, the company I co-founded after Zynga, where I was on poker, which of course is a casino game, was all in the slots category. So this is a category I know and love dearly, and I'm really excited that we finally get to make an episode and go deep with one of the industry giants, SciPlay, and of course Danny, who's been in the weeds for a good long time. So Danny, I always like to start with the background of our guests. So tell us a little bit more about who you are, your journey through the games industry. Obviously, we worked together at Zynga, but since then, you've worked at some very major names in very senior roles over the years. So you've been around and seen a lot. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've had an interesting journey in games. So I was born and raised in New York City. I actually started my professional career in investment banking and private equity after college. I went to NYU for college. So if there are any alumni listening here or watching this podcast, definitely give a shout out or reach out. After a few years in financial services and being in New York City my whole life, I was open to a change of scenery. I moved to the Bay Area to work in tech at Yahoo and was there for almost 6 years. Then a former colleague from Yahoo, who was at Zynga at the time, contacted me to come meet some folks at Zynga. I joined Zynga in 2019, and that was the start of my journey in games. This is where you and I first met and worked together, and we were at the birth of free-to-play and social games on Facebook, and then the start of mobile games. After Zynga, I joined King, and that was another wild ride, with launching Candy Crush and other titles on the emerging mobile platform at the time. We took King public in the equity markets and then got acquired by Activision Blizzard. Then we educated and supported different Activision and Blizzard franchises on how to develop and operate on mobile. So you see some of them coming to life now over the last 2-3 years. After Activision Blizzard, King, I moved to Play Studios, which was my first true hands-on experience in social casino. And then 4 years ago, I joined SciPlay as Chief Strategy Officer and have been expanding my experience and knowledge of the social casino space.
Nice. Yeah, I think so. You said 2019 at Zynga. I think you probably meant 2009.
Sorry. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we get the facts on the record here. Yeah. So 2009.
Long ago,
yes, that's
but
right.
A lot of that experience is still feels fresh, right? So
feels fresh. Yeah, we didn't call them dog years for nothing.
Right.
Like this. Every year at Zynga was like 7 years in the real world. It was definitely a trial by fire and an amazing experience. Okay, so great experience, obviously, in the industry. Tell us more about SciPlay. So those of us who have followed social casino or have worked in social casino, we obviously know SciPlay extremely well. It's one of the biggest players, both by revenue and also by reputation and by impact. But for our listeners and viewers who are not following this category as closely, who is SciPlay? Where do you come from as a company, and what have you been doing in the industry?
Yeah, so SciPlay is an industry leading developer, publisher, and operator of free-to-play, social casino, and casual games. Our current games portfolio is heavily skewed on the social casino side, specifically towards slot games and apps. While SciPlay originally started out making CD-ROM games 25 years ago, we've adapted to the different platform shifts over the last 3 decades, from PC gaming to console to Facebook and web, and of course to mobile now. And for the most part, SciPlay has been making social casino games this whole time. We have a lot of people here that are super passionate about slots and video games, and doing a creative job in bringing these two together to life.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting about SciPlay, in my opinion, is that you've been around and you've been part of this much larger organization. It's quite rare, in my opinion, to have kind of a legacy. Of course, I don't mean this in a derogatory manner at all, but like a legacy developer of real money games or really any particular category of legacy product. Be as able to be successful as SciPlay has been. You've obviously grown both, I think, organically, but also through acquisition. I know a lot of your leadership team is from Phantom EFX, which of course was one of the early players in the social casino space, especially in slots. So tell us a bit more about how SciPlay has come to be as an organization. Where do you draw your talent from, and how have you grown both organically and through acquisition to where you are today, which is, as I mentioned in the intro, 800 employees, 6 studios, 11 titles. That's a lot going on.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So even though you haven't been in the social casino space in a while, it sounds like you still follow a bit and are
Absolutely
up to date on what's going on. So I'll talk about like the SciPlay and the journey. Like SciPlay, I mean, the origins is like Phantom EFX of what you mentioned, and for the most part, we have grown organically. We probably made a couple of small tuck-in like acquisitions, but everything that we have, most of our products are actually homegrown, and they were actually not acquired. But I'll walk you through the history of like a SciPlay. Like for several years, SciPlay was a publicly traded company, but was majority owned by the company now is called Light & Wonder. It was formerly known as Scientific Games. And then it was they divested of several businesses, and then they renamed the company to Light & Wonder. So as I mentioned, it was a publicly traded we were a publicly traded company, but it was majority owned by Light & Wonder. And then SciPlay was fully acquired last year by Light & Wonder, and they are now our parent company. So for those who are unfamiliar with Light & Wonder, it's one of the largest global cross-platform gaming companies in the world. For this audience, gaming at Light & Wonder is largely the regulated real money gaming space. At Light & Wonder, we are comprised of 3 business units. First is the gaming business unit they are one of the top players that makes the slot machines that are in the real world casinos. Then there is the iGaming business unit that is producing both the slot games and the technology for online gambling where it's legal around the world. And now Light & Wonder has us, SciPlay, as the third business unit, and we are the social casino arm, as you mentioned. It's a very synergistic collaboration we have with all the Light & W business units. In fact, approximately 80% of our slots inside our social casino games are ported from the Light & Wonder gaming LAN business. So players that experience the slot game in the real casinos can also play that same slot game in a free, non-gambling environment inside our social casino apps. This is one of our competitive advantages, having popular real-world gaming content inside our social casino games.
Yeah, when I was working in social casino, 2013 is when we founded Rocket Games, and we sold it in 2016. It's relatively early, but not as early as like Playtika or Phantom EFX back in the day. 2010, basically, as early as the app stores were around. The casino games arrived. The biggest driver back in those days, and it sounds like still to this day, was real life casino players who have their favorite machines, who know the brands, who know the machines, who know the odds, who know the return to player, calculations. They either like the highly volatile ones, the classic style slot games, like that was our thing at Rocket Games, that was our specialty, or they like the more casual video slots games that have, a higher return to player, but less volatility. Is that still true to this day in terms of who the audience is? Who are you catering to primarily as a player base? Not necessarily the machines and the kind of strategic advantage, but who's your player base? Is it still to this day the real life players in the casinos, or is it more, has it evolved over time into a more casual audience who has perhaps never been to a casino or doesn't even know that these are real life machines, but are attracted to them in the free to play environment on mobile?
Yeah. I would say social casino players run the gamut from real life casino fans to casual gamers now. But I have seen studies and surveys that show 60% of social casino players have also played in a real life casino over the last year. With social casino, these players get to play and enjoy real life casino content at home or on the go right on their phone. So as I said earlier, that's one of the key advantages for SciPlay. Like our players, like when we talk to them we talk to them regularly. And, they always mention like, oh, wow, I saw this slot machine that was made by Light & Wonder in the casino. And now that you guys have it here and I can just enjoy that same experience, I could get the look, the feel, the sound. And even if it's the math or the volatility that's behind the slot machine, that's what they enjoy. And they want to be able to play it wherever they can if they're not inside the casino. So our players have an affinity for their favorite slots in the real world casino, and they can, further develop it by playing those same slot games in our SciPlay games. They know they can't win real money, but they can still enjoy that similar feeling of playing a slot machine inside a real casino. But I would say the thing that where it's evolved these days is because we have so much integrated meta and live ops features in our games today, we also attract the casual player that's looking for a quick and bite-sized experience where they can feel like they are winning or progressing on a meta feature to chase an even larger virtual jackpot or prize. When we talk to some of these players, they don't necessarily identify themselves as real-life casino players. They enjoy, our SciPlay games for the quests, the tasks, the collection sets that they can gather and complete, and that sense of winning.
Yeah, this is what Slotomania did so well back in the day. I mean, everybody in the early days of social casino was looking at Slotomania. They had, if you look at it, even actually I haven't opened the app for a while, I'll be honest with you, but certainly when I was last looked at Slotomania, by today's standards, you'd look at it and you'd say, that's not, and that's no knock on them. Like the game launched in 2010, right? So we're talking a long time ago. And you look at it today and you're like, oh, well, it's not quite up to the, the level that we'd expect. But what they did so well was the live ops piece. And they did the meta progression piece so well. So people who've been playing Slotomania, a lot of them have been playing since the very early days. And, that loss aversion of not wanting to lose that unbelievable collection and like all the different, features that you've gained over time, earned over time, won over time. You don't want to lose those, right? And so I think that's a big driver in these games. And that's actually something you can't really do in a real life casino. So I'm curious to hear how you guys think about that live ops. I know you alluded to it just now, but like, how are you guys thinking about the live ops? Because I think some of your games, actually, let's talk about that now. Let's talk about some of. So, what is your oldest game right now? And talk us a little bit about how that game has evolved over time. Is it continuing to grow? Is it the same player base? Are you attracting new players? Very curious to hear, because some of these games, like I said, with Playtika, like Slotomania has been around since 2010. So we're talking, 14 years, 15. Is that? Am I doing math right? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I was going to say 25 years, but no, it's not quite 25 years yet. No, 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
That's a really long time. And they're continuing to go from strength to strength. So curious to hear how your guys' portfolio looks at the moment and what your oldest games are doing. We'll talk about newer games in a second, but I want to talk about the old games first and see how they're holding up.
Yeah. So our oldest games are really our largest and most established like franchises. So which are Jackpot Party Casino, Quick Hit Slots, and Goldfish Casino. A large majority of our players. I know those
names so well. Sorry to interrupt, but like I know those names so well. Like those were around back when we were doing Iraqi games. We looked at those games for inspiration, and I'm glad to hear that they're still going strong. So, but sorry to interrupt.
And that's exactly the point. Like some of these titles are well over 20 years old, just on mobile, and even longer on Facebook. So as you've alluded to, you've seen social casino is very evergreen and can be very sticky. So we have player cohorts that have been with us from the launch of the game. So these are, remember the game launched well over a decade, right? And we still had those same players still playing. And in fact, each year they're playing, if not the same, a little bit more. And also the lifetime value that we're driving them continues to increase. And what I always find fascinating is that all of our social casinos started out as that real life casino brand that players loved. And we have evolved that single title experience to a full social casino and casual game experience. So what I mean is, so if you think about it, like social casino back in the early days was just about the core slot machine, right? It was just about, playing and spinning slot machines and trying to win and build your virtual chip balance. But over the last decade in the social casino games, and especially in the SciPlay games, we have evolved that to, what we see in other, I would say, free-to-play social games in general, where all this meta and live ops is now built around the core loop, and these in-game economies are derived and need constant balancing. So what this means is a player is still spinning the slot machines, but in doing so, they are trying to progress or complete in a leaderboard, a tournament, a collection set, a time-limited task, maybe a community like social competitive event. So social casino games are now much more than the original core loop of like slots. Like we've built a bunch of like game loops on top of game loops and top of game loops, but all of it is, still driven by the core, slot spinning experience.
Yeah. And if we look at the industry more broadly, like that, the casino mechanic, even though I think a lot of industry observers look at casino games and always have looked at casino games, I alluded to this in my intro, and kind of, they're kind of a little bit snobbish even about it, which is like, well, why would anybody want to play those games? But it's like, it's entertainment, just like anything else. Like, why would anybody want to watch Bravo shows, reality shows? Like, well, they're, a lot of people's dirty little secret. They really like that stuff, right? And I think what's interesting is that a lot of those features that make casino games, social casino, or real life casino games, you just call it casino games, make them so sticky. They're making their way into a lot of other products, and I think no better story and no more relevant story than Monopoly Go right now, which of course is at its core a slot machine, right? Like that is actually a slot machine. If you look at that game, that is nothing more than Coin Master, Coindozer game, like elevated through IP and a lot of razzle dazzle, a lot of wonderful animations, the sounds, like those are so important in real life casinos. You go there, like everything is sounds around you, right? Like that auditory experience is incredibly powerful. So let's talk about Monopoly Go, because that is to me like an unbelievable success story of what is a casino game, right? Like it's hidden quite well to the casual observer, but it is actually a casino game. So talk a little bit more about what those trends are that you're seeing of casino mechanics, casino games, essentially making their way into the mainstream and becoming much more accessible to a much larger group of people who would never consider themselves actually a slots player or a casino goer, but they will absolutely play Monopoly Go because it's fun. It's really good. It's really engaging.
Yeah. So, I personally don't think of Monopoly Go as a traditional social casino game, like what you and I talked about, and like trying to simulate that casino experience. But with that said, it does leverage social casino mechanics to engage and monetize their players, obviously. For example, the core dice rolling, right, is supposed to be a chance-based outcome and no skill, similar to, a slot machine. And they do a good job playing on I would call it the high risk, high rewards player psychology, right? Especially with the multipliers. So, if you're using the multipliers in Monopoly Go, it's supposed to give the player the anticipation of winning or earning a big jackpot, like when you use bet multipliers in social casino. So Monopoly Go is definitely a good game, especially if you want that Monopoly like board game feeling, going through the ups and downs of, building property and collecting rent. But I don't think of it as a traditional social casino game. But yes, it does utilize different social casino mechanics and psychology. And in those mechanics, like what you just mentioned, it's not just in Monopoly Go. Like it has been, right, in other like social games too, like where it's trying to get you to, it's not wagering, money or virtual currency. A lot of time it's like, okay, I'm going to, wager my characters in an RPG game. I'm going to wager my lives, or I'm going to wager my boosters. And it's trying to, get a player to be more engaged and saying, okay, if I wager more of this, or I play more of this, I have a potential, bigger loot, that I can find, or bigger, dungeon raid that I can go and try to tackle and find.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with you that it's not a air quotes traditional social casino game or casino game more broadly, but I'm going to push back a little bit on what you just said there, which is I really do. I mean, it is essentially Coin Master, which again, Coin Master is also not a traditional social casino game. It's an evolution of chance-based gameplay, but has been able to attract through, what are essentially games of chance mechanics, slot game mechanics, multiplier mechanics, like you said there, a broader audience that wouldn't consider themselves a slots player and wouldn't actually even play a slots game, probably wouldn't enjoy a slots game, but will enjoy something like a Coin Master or a Monopoly Go. From your perspective at SciPlay, and putting aside obviously you guys operate a portfolio of mostly classic, air quotes, classic slots games, because you have the IP, you have the actual real life machines. But putting that aside for 1 second, is that a broader trend you're seeing? Is that something you guys are tapping into as well? Expanding beyond your traditional slots games and the slots IP into more casual, more hybrid type games of chance gameplay, such as a Coin Master or Monopoly Go now, of course, with the IP that they've been able to layer on top of that mechanic.
Yeah, it's something that we always keep an eye on, but one of our biggest strategies and focus is to really, focus on the existing games, because what we find is the existing game and social casino is so evergreen. And also the data is also telling us that there's still a lot of headroom for growth. So, we're doing everything that we can to continue to innovate in the existing games. So we're constantly releasing new content. Every couple of weeks, we're offering like new slot machines to the players. And we're also innovating constantly on the live ops and the meta features that we put into our games every month or every quarter or so, and trying to integrate that with the live ops. So I think right now, like the big focus is still on the slot portfolio and continuing to grow that, because, we've been able to show that, hey, we can continue to grow this, double digits every year. So we're a very player focused company. So that's what we talk about a lot inside this company. So don't forget about servicing these players that you've had that been with you for so long, and also go and try to reactivate some of the prior highly engaged players and really focus on growing that. At the same time, we're still trying to find like new players, but we don't focus like on the old strategy, which was in social casino, which was, okay, try to bring in the player, monetize them, as soon as possible, and then go and try to chase, the next new player. user acquisition is different these days, right? As you know, so that strategy is not going to work, and you're probably not going to be able to drive long-term profitability over time. So our strategy is really like focusing on the existing games, continue to try to grow that, but keep monitoring and see where these emerging, I would call it, like you said, chance-based simple core loops are coming on, and seeing, hey, can we apply the engine that we have, like that product and knowledge and engine that we have in terms of meta and live ops, on top of that, what we think is a simple chance-based core loop, and see if we can develop a new game out of that.
Yeah. That's actually interesting. What you say there, it makes sense. Obviously, your background as a company is in the real money world, and if you're continuing to grow at double digits, then why not? Why not focus on your existing player base? And of course, it shows respect for your existing players. People who've been playing in the casinos on a certain machine, for decades, who want to continue to play on mobile, free to play. Yes, obviously, you should make sure that player has a satisfactory and enjoyable journey and continues to engage. Which brings me to another question, which some social casino companies, a lot of social casinos let's start with this. A lot of social casino startups that had nothing to do with real money gaming, right? Didn't come from land-based casinos, didn't have the IP, didn't license the IP, like us, Rocket Games, like we would make games that were close to real life games, but not so close that they were actually infringing on the IP. And that was kind of air quotes good enough back in those days, right? And then a lot of those companies were acquired by either Playtika, that obviously didn't come from that world, but decided that they were going to make that their thing, and they did very well out of that, or by real money gaming operators, which were either casino adjacent, or they were they were the owners of the IP, the actual slot machines themselves, and they were acquiring nimble mobile talent who were able to move fast and operate in this new world of the app stores, and then they basically layered their IP with the team and did very well out of that. And I think a lot of that has happened by now. This would be very difficult, I think, today to launch a social casino slots-based startup from scratch. I think it would be virtually impossible. I would not even think about trying to do so myself now. So long intro here, but I think the question I'm getting at here is, how much are you leveraging your real money / land-based operations in terms of trying to do cross-pollination, right? Like, are you promoting the free-to-play products in casinos or adjacent to your actual real-life IP, wherever that might appear? That's really what I'm getting at here, is like, how much are you doing of that cross-pollination? You said you've got a lot of synergies across the 3 different groups that you operate. How much of that is being leveraged in both directions, I think, is what I'm thinking about here, is like from the real money to the free-to-play, and then vice versa, from the free-to-play to the real money.
Yeah, so we're starting to lean into that a lot more. So I already gave you the example of where, okay, the real life casino content, from Light & Wonder, we get to have that in SciPlay, right? So that's a competitive advantage that we have already.
Which is huge. I was so jealous of anybody back in those days when we were doing Rocket Games who could actually use real life content. We were like, oh my God, that is so much better. Like that's the real deal. That's the real thing.
Right.
So that is huge. Like, people who don't understand this space, who don't, people who are in gaming but don't necessarily understand social casino, like the power of IP. We talk about IP in gaming all the time, whether it's like Game of Thrones or Harry Potter or whatever. Like, it is powerful. But in casino, it's almost even more powerful, because the players who know quick hit slots, they love quick hit slots. They absolutely gravitate towards that IP. And it is unbelievably powerful as a motivator and as a driver. When you see that and you hear the sounds that you associate with that game, boom, it's like, it works. It works really, really well.
Yeah. So the second thing that we're trying to, going back to your question, like, call it cross-pollinate. It kind of might be like the days when we were at Zynga trying to do all this, like, what we call cross promotion, right? Whenever we like launched a new game. So here's like another kind of light example of it. So in the real casino floor, you can play quick hit slots, like you said. Now today, we have sort of like a side quest that's with it now, saying, okay, if you go and achieve or do X amount of spins in the real life casino, And if you go and go play the same game, the same IP, call it like Huff and Puff, which is one of our popular slot machines in the social casino side of Quick Hit. If you complete that task, then as a player you can earn like a raffle, for like a new car or for some other like big prize. So we're starting to explore more of those like real life and kind of digital like free to play like integration. Another example of how it's the other way around, where social is, because we talk a lot about how like real life casino, real life IP is helping us on the social side, right? But now we also have a partnership where we're helping the real life casino or the real life gaming business that's developing the content. And how we're helping them is that we're leveraging we'll test things in our social casino apps first. So we'll do like designs of like new slot machines and potentially new math, and we'll test that on our players because, as you know, on mobile, we can test a lot quicker, get the data a lot quicker and iterate to find out what potentially will stick. And then we'll inform the gaming side and saying like, hey, we think this type of design is actually, has a high probability of success. So you may want to go and try to design, this type of slot machine with either this type of theme, with this type of art, maybe with this type of math and volatility, or this type of like animation or sound. Because as you know, on the real gaming side or the land-based side, they can't really do A/B testing, right? They have this kind of like the console world, right? They're going to design the game, put it out there, and hopefully it sells. But, after you put it out there, you can't really go and A/B test anymore, especially in a regulated market.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say on the land-based side, it's even harder than on console. I mean, on console, at least you can kind of mess around a little bit on the back end, and
you might be able to do a patch, right? Or maybe
right, exactly. But
the
once you put the machine out there and it's regulated, like you can't make any changes to it. So, is, I mean, that was what it's both a blessing and a curse, I think, because everybody is impacted the same way, right? And so if you're competing essentially in a level playing field with all the other operators and mathematicians designing the machines and the volatility, but at the same time, as a free to play designer and a mobile app developer, it was it would be frustrating, I think, not being able to do some A/B tests or try to tweak things on the back end to make them more effective. So understood. So that's interesting. So you've got you do have a two-way street going on here, where both sides, you benefit on the free-to-play side from the IP, of course, which we've both mentioned multiple times now. It is incredibly powerful. It is a huge motivator for players in the casino world. And then on the free-to-play side, you're offering essentially kind of almost like an A/B testing factory, if you will, where you can kind of give the real money side some insights into what might work. So that's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, you talked about math, and math is one of the biggest things, most important things. I mean, math is important in all game design, different games, of course, different level of importance, depending on what kind of genre you're in. But math is obviously very important unbelievably important for slots and casino games. It's all about the odds. It's all about that experience of feeling the near misses and the big wins, right? So one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I haven't seen much talk about this in the industry, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. AI, right? AI is everywhere. AI, to me, if at least having worked in casino and having had to balance slot machines and try to figure out what makes a fun slot machine, what makes the math work, right? I think AI has the potential to be a massive, massive accelerant in terms of being able to do some of these iterations. How are you guys thinking about AI? What are you doing on the AI front? And what do you think the industry is going to be doing regarding AI as they incorporate? I mean, they have to, right? Like, I think the bigger, if you're not using AI in your designs, in your iterations, like you're going to be left behind, right? So that's what I'm curious to hear. How are you guys thinking about it, and how do you think the industry is thinking about it more broadly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's a big question that we have that we discuss a lot here internally too. So yes, AI is becoming more and more important in gaming in general, I would say, and the social casino category is no exception. We are certainly using AI in our business, with respect to using AI to generate pay tables and math models, or more broadly to build the math behind the slots, I would say we're not completely there yet. Slot math is very complicated. And then in social casino, you have to account for the fact that while slots are a core gameplay loop, and and that has a model and math in itself, now because of the evolution of social casino, there's a lot of other math going on behind the scenes to integrate the features, the meta, and the live ops events into the player experience and the overall economy. So this is the one thing that I discovered. Like every game, obviously has its own economy and sub-economy, but I find that in social casino, it can get, pretty like complex, especially as you have a lot of player cohorts that are just, with you for so long, and you have to now do a lot of segmentation, and each segment, has a different behavior and different response and different economy behind it. So AI definitely, we're starting to look at it to help us like kind of get a head start, but you still need that human, right? To make sure that the slots gameplay has to be fun and engaging, right? Because when you talk to the players, this is why they come and play. Like, hey, I get that fun and that experience. I don't think a machine today yet can necessarily help decipher that or help you determine sort of that fun factor and all that like volatility. But the math, there are models out there that we're starting to see that could potentially help you get a head start, but it's definitely still a balancing act. I would say that requires a human today. I think it's possible that it will get there at some point, but today, at least, this is an area that, while it's on our radar, like, we haven't completely like tackled yet. But we definitely have used AI in like other areas that I can go into if you want, on the art side, the development side, and QA.
Yeah, we can talk about it in a second, but I'm super curious because if I were to do a startup in the social casino space starting today, that's where I would start, right? Like whether it works or not, I don't know, but I would start with the AI piece and be like, okay, could I give ChatGPT or whatever, Gemini, Claude, could I give them the designs? Because you can, the pay tables are out there. Like everybody knows what the pay table. Now it can't do the audio. It can't do the like all of that has to work together, right? And that's what makes slots so interesting. Is like it's as auditory as it is visual, as it is the math, right? And all of those things have to work in harmony. But nonetheless, you could feed all the pay tables of all the top machines in a certain category if you wanted to go, let's say, classic slots, which is what we did, which is the kind of old, one-arm bandit type style of gameplay. You could feed all the top games into that and ask it to generate a new pay table that is different and taps into a different motivator than those. And that's where I would start. So I'm just super curious. I'm going to peel this onion, one more layer. Like in terms of trying something like that, like have you guys tried anything in that vein? It sounds like you're aware, obviously, and you're playing around with AI in different areas, and we can talk about those areas in a second. But I really want to dig into this just a little bit deeper, because the math side of things is something that just I have to believe that AI is going to be better, at least at the initial phase. And then, of course, you plug in the human and you make sure that it works in the real world. But gosh, to me, it feels like such a powerful opportunity for a game that is so math-based.
I agree. There definitely should be opportunities to help you get that head start, and then see what the output is with AI. But I just don't know if the AI can, it could reproduce like some type of math model. But what you don't know potentially is that math model, going to necessarily work, right? Is it going to be that feel that the player is going to get? I don't think it has gotten there. It can't help you truly decipher that or create that yet. That's where you need the human.
Yeah, but you could, I mean, again, pushing back on this a little bit, like you could do 1,000 math models very, very quickly using AI, and then you could put them into kind of an existing machine, existing art style that is like, close enough to this. And you could essentially prototype the hell out of the math models until you land on one that works. Because the way it at least used to work back when we were working on these is a human would have to do the math model from scratch, and it would take a long time. Like you would actually have to sit there and like you would have to tweak all the numbers, and it would be ginormous spreadsheets, and it would be like
how did you
slow
guys start it back
processing.
then? Would you like go and watch other machines or the videos?
Yeah.
Go online. Like,
yeah. We would literally, that's exactly what we did. Yeah, we would literally go, we would look at YouTube videos of machines. We would go to casinos and like, we would actually look at machines and like see how they're playing. The pay tables are all public because it's a regulated business. Like that was one of the benefits as a free-to-play developer. Like you could look at the pay tables and you could be like, okay, we can reverse engineer essentially what's going on, which is what all the industry does anyway. Like you guys all look at each other's pay tables to understand what's going on and why something's working and why something's not. And then what we would do is we would build big ass spreadsheets where we would essentially put the numbers in and the variables, and Microsoft Excel. Like this is actually, I think, pre-Google Sheets even. So yeah, we were doing everything in Excel, and we would have these monster models with macros and all kinds of like, functions going on that would essentially spit out what we would then need to program and code into the product itself. That was very time consuming. And that's why I'm like harping on this AI piece, because if you could fast forward that process, you could have 1,000 models in the time it takes you to do, like before your morning coffie.
I totally agree. I think it's similar to what we see like on the art side. Like with that, you should be able to, I don't want to buy a percentage, but we'll call it at least halfway, right? You can at least get halfway, maybe 75% of the way there, so that, now you can free up time to do other things.
Exactly.
So that's what we see like on the art side, on the development side, and even on the QA side. It's like, okay, with AI, you should be able to get, hopefully a very strong head start. And then now with the human, go and apply, your sort of like review, your polish and your finish, and then, get it to the finish line. So, we have accelerated, how we try to continue to accelerate, how we develop slots. We were already on a good cadence where, we're able to like launch something every couple of weeks. I think, we're always looking for ways, and it'll probably be with, AI to help us, even accelerate that time cycle.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, moving on from AI. So you just mentioned new products, and I actually did want to talk about that anyway. You have 11, based on the information that I have, you have 11 products live in market. You have an 800 person team. That's a lot of great resources, doing somewhere around 700 million plus, I think the latest numbers in terms of annual revenue. Big numbers. How are you thinking about new product development versus maintaining and supporting the live ops for the existing products? Let's start with this. When was the last product that you launched, and what are you doing right now? Do you have lots of prototypes, that you're working on, and you kill the ones that don't look promising and you put resources into the ones that are? How often do you want to be launching new products? Do you have a cadence that you're looking towards? Very curious to hear how you're balancing the older products like Quick Hit Slots, which, like I said, was around way back when we were doing Rocket Games, with like new products that could potentially be game changers for the future.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there.
I like to do that.
Yeah. So let me think. So I think we haven't really, I'm trying to think back. When was the last time we launched and started scaling a new title? It's probably been more than 5 years ago, to be honest.
Okay.
Again, it just goes back to our strategy is to continue growing the existing titles every year. Because again, when we look at the data, there's just still a lot of runway like ahead of us, like in terms of number of players that, haven't touched our games yet, or players that did touch it and for some reason they have churned. So, we spend a lot of time trying to reactivate those players because we find that, hey, the LTV on a prior, highly engaged player is going to be a lot higher than trying to chase that new player. And then the data is also showing like, hey, wow, these people have really high engagement, but they still haven't potentially monetized yet, right? So, and there's still room for them to convert them into payers. And then the data showing, hey, even if we do convert them into payers, this is, how much they're potentially spending on a monthly or yearly basis. And again, we know that the way we run our games, we're not out there to necessarily squeeze as much out of the players as soon as possible. Like, we literally just like try to focus in getting them to play every day and, playing more each every day. And, kind of indirectly that will lead to like, more opportunities to monetize it, right? So we're really like focus on that. So it's just, and so as a result, we're constantly focusing on adding new content to our games and innovating on the live ops that we run our game. So it's all, as it's all about servicing that players and motivating them to come play every day. But so with that said, we have been experimenting with some new games, like new games that are either in the social casino category, the traditional social casino category that you and I have been talking about, or casual games that have a very simple core loop that is very analogous, right, to social casino, or like this kind of chance-based core mechanic, and then saying, okay, we have all this like meta and live ops knowledge about how to, incorporate that, around the core loop. Again, let's make some like disciplined bets, right? To see, where we can find some heat, and go and, design and launch a new game. So, we have a couple of games out there in testing, like most developers, the first thing we test for is like engagement and retention. So, we're constantly testing for that, and, we're seeing some good heat on that. We want to make sure that's, scalable. If it's scalable, then we start, working on the monetization side of the game. And if we can get that monetization, and still balance for this high engagement and retention that we see, it's going to lead to this high LTV, right? That is required to cover, the cost of user acquisition that is, just continues to increase every year. So I would say, to sum it all, like a lot of it is just really focusing on the core games to continue to basically grow that, but, making some, I would call it like disciplined, like bets on some of the new games, and they'll go through like the traditional kind of what I call like new game green light phases that we're all familiar with in the space.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you think about staffing these new bets that you're taking? And I would love to learn a bit more about it. Sounds like if I'm reading between the lines here, and if you're able to tell me, that would be great. That they may not actually be kind of core slots / casino. They might be something a bit more adjacent, something more on the casual gaming side, which of course has always been the case. Like there is overlap between casual gamers who want just that kind of dopamine hit of just, Candy Crush or, match threes or whatever, which, lots of things happen. I mean, there is similar to slot machines, but obviously not the same thing. There's always been a lot of overlap between the category of social casino and that type of casual match three, razzle dazzle things happening on the screen type of gameplay. So are you saying that that's the direction you're heading in, or that's where your bets are, or is it more, hey, we're going to do more of the classic style social casino bread and butter stuff that we know so well?
Yeah, I would say the large majority is going to be that the bread and butter that we know, and then again, I'm just throwing a percentage out there. It's not the exact, but another, call it 10 to 15% of our business will be on things that are more casual, maybe casual puzzle in nature. Again, that, kind of like what you just alluded to, like things that we feel are very like simple core loop that can be very evergreen and, could be played at a very like, fast pace, right? Like we're not doing anything like with a dice roll or like a coin master, but, think of a type of mechanic where, okay, it's kind of like a slot machine, right? The whole point is like getting people to spin, right? As fast as possible and as much as they can in a given day, because that will lead to them, progressing in other like meta and live ops features where, we drive, a lot of the engagement for the players. So I would say that's where the focus is. But, but to answer your question in a different way is, we're constantly talking to our players. So we're constantly, running surveys, even do like a VIP program. We're constantly talking to the players to understand not only their behavior inside our games, but what else are they doing, right? Because at the end of the day, social casino is another form of entertainment. We're just competing, for timeshare, like right on their phone or whatever screen. So we try to understand what else are they watching, what else are they listening, and then to games, what else are they playing? And as you said, a lot of social casino players do also play other casual games, and we try to understand, okay, what is it fun about those casual games that you like? And then what we find is that, okay, a lot of things that you like, those same elements, are also apparent in either traditional social casino games or in some of these new games that we're kind of thinking about that play to that same, player behavior and motivations. And so those are the ones that we try to go after.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that brings us to a topic that's very important, I think, for all developers, not just social casino developers, but that's UA, user acquisition and distribution and growth. Obviously, post-IDFA, everyone's talked about this. It is very much more difficult to do targeting now. It used to be, the way we scaled Viva Slots Vegas, which was our big hit game back in the day, was, we did the LTV CAC calculation and we did the payback periods, and it was very easy to go and identify, players exactly the right people, literally the exact right people who would absolutely, resonate with our game based on, lookalike targeting on competitors and things like that. That's very much more difficult now. Obviously, the costs have gone up anyway, and now post-IDFA, it's even harder. So how are you guys doing UA? How has that changed the social casino world? How has it changed your world? What does profitable user acquisition look like now? If I'm hearing some of what you're saying correctly, it's you're not necessarily doing a huge amount of new user acquisition. I'm not going to, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're maybe doing more remarketing and retargeting for lapsed players. But tell me more in your own words about what are you guys doing? How does it look now versus how it used to look back in the day?
So the analogy that I like to use is free-to-play mobile games has always been about continuous product innovation, testing, and optimization. And we apply that same mentality in marketing and user acquisition. So we're social casino did really start on Facebook UA, like as you mentioned, but everyone in the industry, including us, we test and buy everywhere now, and it's just not online. We've been experimenting with offline marketing these days. You may have seen some of the SciPlay games on TV and out-of-home advertising, such as the partnership or celebrity tie-in we did with Jerry O'Connell for Quick Hit Slots and Joe McHale for Jackpot Party. So again, we do a ton of research to understand where our players are spending their time when not playing our games, but also when they could be more likely to pick up a game or reactivate in one of our games. So then we go and make an informed strategy to advertise there and measure for the returns that we're expecting there. So we're constantly innovating on how we do marketing, just like how we're always innovating in the product to provide that player with the best entertainment experience. So back to your question, examples, we have definitely us and the industry have definitely broadened out from the traditional Facebook UA. And it's just everywhere now. I would say wherever, you think your players are, or even if you don't think your players are, go and try to experiment with it. And that's what we've done a lot with TV and offline. And, we're seeing really good results there.
Okay. Can you share any more about kind of what percentage of your overall, I mentioned that a couple of times now, about $700 million in revenue, 800-person team. Can you share any insight on what percentage of that is marketing and, payback periods, things like that?
I would say.
Understand if you can't.
Yeah. If you go back and look at our last time, actually, no, we're part of Light & Wonder, a public company. They do disclose the publicly the segment revenue. So for SciPlay, I think if you go over the last quarter, we're up to about a $200 million dollar revenue per quarter. So if you just do the simple run rate out, we're closer to 800 million, right?
Nice.
Company.
Nice.
I don't think we necessarily disclose how much we spend publicly in UA, but again, if you go back and look at third-party reports, or even you look at the last time we were still doing public filings, you'll see that our UA percentage is still in the 20s, I would say, in the low 20s of revenue.
Okay.
Okay. And and I know we talk a lot about reactivation and then remarketing, but there's a lot of that, but a lot of the UA that I would say, I don't know the exact, I can't disclose the exact percentage, but we're still out there, trying to, grab new players and also reactivate the players. So it's just a balancing act. And the way we think about it is we track and monitor closely every single dollar that we spend, and wherever it's driving the best returns, we'll lean into it. Like the marketing team always talks about, they're like portfolio managers, so like investment portfolio managers, right? They're managing a portfolio of not only games, but they're managing a portfolio of user acquisition and retargeting channels. And our job is to basically drive the highest return that we can see.
Got it. Yep, makes total sense. I would actually say 20% ish of revenue is actually, in my opinion, fairly low compared to what I used to see, and I think is still the case, especially in the casino category. It used to be that you would spend quite, but again, it's changed probably quite a bit now, because it was a land grab back in those days. Like, you were spending as much and as fast as you could to get all those new players in there. And I think it sounds like it's a much more, I mean, understandably so, it's a much more mature market now, where most of the land grab has happened and most of the players are probably in the ecosystem already. And it's mostly about making sure that they stay in the ecosystem, and that if they churn, they lapse, you retarget them and bring them back, which, if I were to editorialize, that sounds like that's where the industry is right now, which makes total sense. Okay. A final question on the UA side, or kind of the targeting side. You said you're everywhere and you're doing celebrity partnerships with, Joel McHale. And the one thing that caught my eye is that you're partnered with Austin FC, football club, soccer club, and Major League Soccer. How is that working? How did that come about? I'm just curious to hear how a social casino company and a Texas soccer team go together in harmony. Tell us a little bit about how that happened and how it's working.
Yeah. So do you follow soccer or football?
I do. I mean, I don't follow Major League Soccer, but I'm a European, and so I follow. I lived in the UK for many years, and so I follow Premier League Soccer. So I watch on Peacock mostly, streaming on the weekends and in the mornings. I usually watch like 2 or 3 games back to back if I have the time. So that's my yes, I do. I follow soccer.
Yeah. So the Austin FC partnership is actually an interesting one. That partnership is actually not about player acquisition or game branding. The Austin FC partnership is about connecting with the Austin community as we're one of the top employers in Austin. So Austin is actually one of our largest studio locations, and we want to continue to grow there and bring in best-in-class talent. Austin FC is actually the second most recognized and celebrated brand in Austin. And, we had the opportunity and became super excited to be affiliated with that brand and use that as a way to try to reach more potential talent in the Austin area. But trust me, as a business person, when I was working with a PR group, I was like, okay, my first brain was like, okay, is this about, user acquisition? Okay, let me model this out. Like, okay, how much is this going to cost, and how many installs are we going to bring, and what's the lifetime value on that install? So,
that's what I was thinking. Yeah. That's where my head went immediately. I was like, how on earth is there ROI? Like, that cannot possibly be, LTV versus CAC positive, sponsoring a soccer team. Okay, but that makes a lot more sense.
The ROI if it's more about a different way, right? The ROI
comes in different ways. Exactly.
Yeah, it comes in the talent, right? We're all about talent here. So we look at the ROI, the way we measure it is about, okay, how many inbounds, or even the success of the outbound, candidates when we go and recruit, the quality of that, the conversion of that. So typical funnel way of looking at it. But, this is more about I would say talent acquisition and retention, versus typical user acquisition marketing.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I mean, because the lens I had was Major League Soccer. It was the Premier League, in the UK sponsorships. Which, if you watch it at all, you'll notice that 9 out of 10 of the ads in the stadium is sports betting ads, right, or gambling ads, both for the UK market, but also for the Chinese market, as well. So it very. Yeah, so that was the lens I had. Was like, okay,
those are probably a lot more expensive too. I would say those are.
Yes, I'm pretty sure Premier League Soccer, sponsoring in Emirates Stadium is going to be a little bit more than Austin's. I don't even know what the Austin Stadium is called. So, but okay, cool, makes a lot of sense. All right, well, we're coming up to time here, but I always ask all of our guests one final question, because we are a gaming podcast after all, and so that question is: what 3 games are you currently playing, or are you most excited about? And you can't use your own companies.
Well, okay. I don't know if I can keep it to 3 games, but I don't know if I can keep it to a game. So I do have to do them, but there is, one SciPlay game. I'm going to quickly mention that that I play the most is probably Quick Hit Slots.
Okay.
And then outside of our games, I do love sports and stats naturally. So I continue to play Madden football, MLB The Show, NBA 2K on console, and then I have experience in like the casual and match 3 category. So, and I play a lot of those games with my 2 daughters. So Candy Crush, Royal Match, Gardenscapes, because my daughter loves the narrative in Gardenscapes. And then my personal,
by the way, so do I. By the way, I'm a Gardenscapes player, and I love the narrative too. And I've never admitted that before, but I'm admitting it on this show now. So
yeah, like I see my daughter more engaged with the narrative, and it's like she's telling me like, "Hey, can you help me pass some of these levels so I can unlock these?"
Me and your daughter have a lot in common. Okay.
And then to be honest, my guilty pleasure is, and I played a lot of what I call action RPGs. So like Survivor.io. I still play that. And literally last week, I just pre-registered for Archero 2. And I'm waiting for that to come out in the US so I can start playing that.
Nice. All right. Well, good. I'm glad you're still playing games, as am I. And I think all of our guests, if you're working in the industry, you got to keep playing games. You got to keep fresh. You got to stay on top of things. So
Agreed.
I really appreciate that. All right. Well, that's all we have time for today. We're right on time, actually. And so, Danny, I just want to say big thank you for coming on the Navic Gaming Podcast. It's been a really fun trip down memory lane for me, at least, going back through some of the social casino titles that I used to know so well. I deconstructed the crap out of them, including Quick Hit Slots, which was one of our inspirations back in the day. So it's been a real pleasure, and I'm so glad we made this happen, and it's been great catching up with you again as well. So thank you.
Same. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I'm finally glad we got together, and hopefully we can talk soon again.
Absolutely. Welcome back anytime. And if you do have any new game launches, especially if they're outside of the casino genre, I want to definitely have you back and talking about those and how they're doing and how you're leveraging your existing player base with maybe a different genre. So definitely interested in that. Perfect. And then, of course, as always, a big thank you to all of our listeners. We will be back next week with more interviews, more insights, and more analysis from the weird and wonderful world of gaming. So until next time, friends, feel free to send questions, guest recommendations, and comments to me. My email is nico@navic.co.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@navic.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Navic has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.navic.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Navic Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.navic.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.